How's it going, everyone? So we're now back inside of Maya, and what we're going to be doing is, for the next chapter, we're going to be tackling both the low poly and the UVs. So we have our high poly inside of Maya here. As you can see, the poly count is pretty absurd. So we have this guy, and then we also, on a different layer, have our kind of mid poly that we made. This is the one that we did actually bring into ZBrush, and this is the one that we have spat out of ZBrush. So like I said, we're actually going to be mixing the UVs and the low poly both into the same chapter. I originally thought I was going to do these two separately, but after kind of thinking about it a little bit more, there's a lot of parts of this model that we're going to be duplicating around, like the feet, for example. The low poly models are all going to be the same, so I might as well, for those parts at least, UV as I go. For some of the bigger parts, I'll probably save the UVing to the end, but anytime I'm doing something like this guy here, for example, and I know I'm just mirroring it over. I'm just going to do one, sort of clean it up, do the UVs for it, and then flip it over, just so that way we can just save as much time as possible. The low poly for this is, I feel like it's going to take longer than the actual high poly chapter did, but nowhere near as long as the mid poly. We got most of the hard work done here, so what I want to do is kind of make a new layer here. We're going to call this one let's see. Oh, got to click on this box here. We're going to call this LP for low poly. I'm just going to color it blue. I can't remember if I brought this up already, but when you have something in this layer, that's the color of the wireframe. So our ZBrush layer here, if we look at the wireframe, it's going to be the default color. But if we go to our high poly, it's going to be this red because the layer is red. So this is just a quick way to sort of tell what layer things are on, without actually like selecting all the objects in the layer. So we're not going to have to touch this anymore. This is already done as it is, but we are going to just piece by piece sort of refine the stuff, put it into the low poly layer, and yeah, it shouldn't take as long, so let's just sort of dive into it. I'm going to start off with this guy here, and he has all these screws attached to them, and if I remember correctly, there are these screws down here as well. So the cool thing about this is we can just grab these guys and delete them. We no longer have a use for them because they're going to be all baked down into normal information. So let's go ahead and it might be easier to just go about this and delete each hole. I was thinking of sort of doing half of it and then mirroring it over, but there's also on the right side there sort of more of a unique piece that we're going to have to keep intact. So what I'm doing is just selecting all the faces in the hole. And there's a lot of n-gons going on here, so it's a bit more difficult. Just going to grow selection until I have all of those guys selected. Delete that, and then we can sort of select the edge ring. Once again, the fact that there's some funky geo here is making this a bit more difficult, but I'm going to select that, shift right click, merge edges to center. It's going to collapse that guy to a point, and I can just merge that off. So the things that we're trying to do here is get our geometry clean, keep things flowing nice and smooth. We don't want any more n-gons. We're going to try and get everything down to a quad or a triangle. We're also going to be deleting all of this extra information that's going to be baked down into normal detail. So this, for example, can just be a square because we just don't need any of that additional information, right? So we're just really simplifying this stuff. And this pass is definitely not the most interesting part of the modeling, but it's arguably one of the most important just because this is actually what our final model is going to be. So we got to really make sure we nail this part. Let's go ahead and merge that. This is a triangle, but that's fine. I can just delete that for visual sake. We'll do the same on this side. This will get a bit of a different treatment. because there's actually something going inside of it that we're not baking down. So let's get rid of this stuff. Oh man, so right now is kind of the whole coronavirus outbreak. So I'm actually using Macs at home for the work that I'm doing. And using Max and Maya from home is kind of messing with my brain a little bit. But we seem to be going along still at a pretty good pace here. So let's keep going. We're almost done all these top ones. Cool. Because in Max, deselect is Alt, right? So for a Maya user, you kind of press an Alt for everything, so it's kind of easy to get that stuff all mixed up. So let's drag all these out, merge them. So how exactly do we want to handle this? I think the edges on this is pretty appropriate. If we hide this layer and bring in the high poly, it's kind of mushed all down, so I think if I jump back to this layer, I can probably just get rid of this line. Interesting, it's not letting me do a ring select for some reason. So I'm just gonna manually select these. So that should be good enough for the bake information. If I unhide that, and we can sort of turn on our wireframe. We definitely have some room to sort of adjust that stuff. I'm just trying to figure out why it's not liking me going for a ring select here. That's kind of weird. If all else fails, we'll probably find out during the UVs, but let's just bring this in. Let's shift period to grow the selection and just sort of grow this out a little bit. So nice, that'll bake down a lot better. Can go back and isolate this guy. So that'll do that part good. We also now have to start worrying about closing all this stuff off. And it doesn't want to do that either. Something weird is going on here. Let me try using the cutting tool. Cutting tool works just fine. And that should do it for that. We can continue along with these screws here. Just merge that off where it makes sense. This one can just be merged down here. Merge that down. or not. That's going to cover that up. We'll come back to that. We'll just do the screws for now. I feel like there's just a lot of extra data. It might just be lagging. That's why it's acting weird. So I'm going to go to Edit, Delete All by Type History, which is going to delete all the history in the scene. There's a lot of stuff going on, so that's going to save us some extra data. That still doesn't seem to be it, though. Strange. Well, it's not the end of the world. We can still move forward with that. Okay, just got these two, and then we have a few hidden underneath. Delete that. Merge that to center, snap it over to the side. This one, snap to the bottom corner. Geo's already starting to look a lot cleaner. These screws on their own have done quite a bit of damage to kind of make this mesh a bit of a nightmare. So we're just going to be able to quickly clean all that up. Lucky for us, most of these things don't have too many screws. It's just this front plate and the sort of main shell of everything. That's kind of the biggest burden as far as this cleanup goes. Everything else is mostly going to be poly count and UVs and whatnot. So let's go ahead and merge all that. Seem to have some stuff to work on here, but let's go check out what's going on down here. This is an interesting one. So we do, if we unhide everything, we have a tube going through here, and in the high poly, you can't really see any gaps, so I'm thinking we could just bake this down to normal information and just save a little bit of geo. So let's go ahead and just straight up delete all of this. I'm finding it really strange that ring selection isn't working anywhere, even when it's supposed to. Yeah, I'm really not sure why that's happening, but I guess we can continue with our method. I was just testing off screen if it was something to do with my mouse, and it kind of seems like it is, so I'll have to look into that in a little bit, but we should be able to work around that for the time being. Nothing here so far is too difficult to do without that. It's just a bit of an inconvenience. So let's go ahead and remove all of this. Okay, let's do the same for the other side. And honestly, not being able to ring select will take a lot longer. I'm just gonna quickly try something. Okay, so I just unplugged my mouse and replugged it back in, and that seemed to do the trick. So we're going to be moving a lot faster now. Okay. So yeah, we can just straight up delete all of that because the screws are going to be baked down like normal information. And then these holes, we're never going to actually see through the holes, so we can bake that down as normal information. And the parts that are very distorted are actually going to be completely blocked by the tube that's going through it. So let's go ahead and start connecting this together. And this is obviously way, way, way less geometry than if we were to have a hole going through it. And since it's such a super small detail, this is the level of detail that I'm pretty comfortable having. That roundness is more than enough. Like we definitely want this model to be quite a bit rounder than probably your typical game model, but that's such a tiny, tiny detail down there where you really don't have to worry about it. Okay, let's go ahead and start doing this infinitely faster now that we can just double click and move along. So let's go ahead and just do the same to this side as we did to the last. If you prefer to just sort of do one and duplicate it over, that works too, but I feel like this part's pretty quick, so I really don't mind just doing it twice. We definitely do not need this, and okay. Cool, we were having some issues around this area, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that's because this here is not welded properly. This needs to be snapped onto here. Merge verts, that way. Well, we can just grab those faces so they're easier to work with. And we can see what's going on. Definitely some weird stuff. So if I start to move this down, yeah, there's just a gap. So this should be pretty easy. I'm just going to add a cut here and attach it here. And snap it up. And this is just going to be something that we can merge this to. So it's not going to be causing that issue. Of course, over here, it's still going to be a problem because we don't have a similar situation going on over here. So with those guys anchored down, that should take care of that. The stuff is all as it should be, as long as I snap that down. Yep, that's all proper geo. Just making sure there's nothing that is a face with more than 4 sides. And everything's kind of anchored down properly. Okay. And let's do the same thing on the other side. Snap that there. And then this side as well. Yep. Merge all that. I just want to make sure that this is all flush because that will affect, yep, that'll affect the normals that we're baking later on. I'll definitely be explaining a lot more about that when we're actually doing the unwrap on this part as well as the bake itself, but let's go ahead and flatten that all out. Forgot to include this part in the flatten. It's all flush, so it's important to keep that together. Just as like a really quick explanation, so as you're doing this, you can sort of understand why I'm stopping to do this stuff. When we're baking, things either have to be a 90-degree angle between transitions or an organic sort of like less than or more than 90 degrees. Obviously, it has to be one of those two. Those are the only two options, but depending on which one of those it is, we get to treat if the edge is hard or soft differently. So I'm just sort of making sure that visually, if it looks like it's 90 degrees, it actually is 90 degrees. That way I'm not second guessing and can actually make a pretty good assumption as to if it's a hard or a soft edge when I'm going through that stage. Another thing I want to do is I definitely want to round this out a little bit more. It seems round, but it is decently chamfered, and it is kind of like the center stage of this model. So let's just go ahead and quickly grab these guys, deselect the ones on the back that we don't want to get rid of, like these edge ones, and control backspace. So from here, I'm literally just going to make this stuff rounder by selecting the edges, hitting Control B to bevel, and it's just going to add in a lot more edges to smooth it out. And that should do it. I think I'm just going to hit Control B, keep it at 0.5, because that'll just average everything out. There's definitely some difference, but it's what it was before, but just twice as smooth, so I'll just trust that that's going to be good enough. Let's go ahead and start anchoring these down. So I'm going to try and just keep this as symmetrical as possible. Ideally, these long skinny triangles, you typically want to, interesting, connect. Let's go ahead and merge. Something up this guy here. Yeah, something definitely up this guy. Okay. Yeah, long skinny triangles is definitely one of the ways as much as you can in this case. We're really not too much to do about it. We definitely keep these really strange how that's going to do with that. If I merge it, it'll be fine. So hopefully this will take care of that. Yeah, our way too big with taking down. It's very strange how I merge like this. When it's just them. It'll actually work when we merge them together. It's a little bit more picky. Very bizarre. So I'm just going to merge through here. Or just to repeat last again. Okay, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4. So let's start going inside out now. If I go and hit spacebar, let's try and go to the exact middle line, which would be this guy. And just start cutting out. This is not really any thinner than that, so let's start that level to move over. Okay, keep going. So maybe actually better focus. I don't have to duplicate over, all things considered. But anyway, pretty much wrapping this up. We're going to respread polygons here to make sure nothing's too pinched. This is actually kind of close, but should be fine, especially this is all flush, so it's always cutting maybe anything like that. Okay, let's do the last location point. Nice. So for this guy, it kind of seems like, oh, we forgot to do the inside. I'm also going to take care of this before I forget about it. I'm going to have to close these guys off. Like I said, the low poly really isn't the most complex thing in the world to do. Probably if this is something that's brand new to you, one of the best things you could probably do in this case would be to watch the sort of like chapter compilation video where I go over the majority of the larger rules and kind of follow along with that. This is going to be more of the actual process of it, but I'm also going to be breaking down exactly why I'm doing it as I go. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of repetition as far as this stuff is concerned. Okay, let's definitely these. Should be more like that. And just like some of the mid-poly parts, I kind of apologize for not having the most to comment on about this. This is just pretty basic, connecting things up and making sure, you know, the topology is good, kind of triangulating it and making sure that there's going to be no wacky geo or n-gons, you know. So the reason we don't want sides with more than 5 faces is because then when we start to bake things and we start to bring them into engines, each different engine is going to kind of figure out how the polygons are going to be distributed. So when you start getting that stuff done automatically, sometimes it turns out really good, and sometimes the engine or whatever you're using doesn't exactly know what you want and it gives you some funky results. So me controlling it this way is going to let us get some better bakes. It's going to bring it into the engine with no artifacting or sort of weird issues that you might expect. So it's just one of those cases, better safe than sorry. Okay, let's close out this here to change it up. And then also start getting some screen evidence, we know where we are set. Okay. Probably not the best piece to start with, if I'm going to be totally honest. But we're going to have to get through it at some point or another, so I might as well get it out of the way. This is definitely the example piece I've been using for most things, just because of the amount of diversity it has going on with the different shapes and some hard surface parts and some organic parts. But for this, when it comes to cleanup, definitely not the most enthralling piece there is. Okay, just a few more. And then for this last one, kind of seems like maybe that kind of a triangle will do. And that'll do it for this piece, unless I'm missing anything else. Got down here, we cleaned all that up. This stuff is all squared off, so that should be fine. Like if I pull this squared off, square, should be fine. Just in case, let's go for one last merge vertices. But I think that'll do it for this piece here. What we can do with this guy is we can slap him into the low poly layer, and that is a final piece. Other than the UVs, that guy is done. So let's go ahead and do this. Some of these guys still have the hard edge filter on them. So we have this piece. Is there anything I would change about this? Potentially. I'll come back to that guy in a bit. I want to see if there's a good example of, you know, some UVs that we could do right now just to sort of keep things fresh and try something new. Let's go ahead and do the feet here. This part is going to be attached to this, but these are a little bit different. They're rubber, so they're going to be their own thing. So let's go ahead and turn off the hard edges, and I'm going to UV them. So first things first, I'm going to delete this. This bottom indent is something that we can just completely put into our normal map. So we have this a bit tapered. First of all, we have unneeded geometry here. So let's go ahead and grow that. And I'm going to deselect this and I'm going to control right click two edges to edge perimeter and deselect that and just delete that stuff there. So let's get a better idea as to what's going on here. There's a bit of a gap here now, so let's snap this up and let's bring the high poly into view to get a better idea as to what's going on here. So this is definitely chamfered. I can hit Control B to bevel it. We can try and get that look a little bit better. As far as adding more segments, I really don't think it's necessary for such a small piece like this, so I'm just going to leave it as is. And we kind of want to get this just as close to the high poly as possible. So let me just grab these edges down here and shrink it in. So I like this, where it's just barely poking through. And then I'm going to want that up here as well. So that'll bake down really nice. As for the top of it, let's turn off wireframe and hide the high poly. For the top of it, we're going to want it to snap directly to the base here. In fact, I'm going to actually want these to all actually be super flush with it. It already kind of seems like they are, but I'm just going to actually go ahead and snap it all the way around just in case. Just holding V and moving it, of course. And that should be all the way around. So let's go ahead and delete this top. It's not actually visible. And then with the bottom, can delete these guys. Collapse that to the center like we've done before. If we really want the lowest poly count possible, what we can do is connect the ends like this. When you're trying to get the lowest poly count with a cylinder, this will actually get a lot less than if you were to have everything merging in the middle. Not a lot less, but like it'll save you a few polygons, and since we're duplicating this around, we might as well save as much geo as we can. This is a pretty monstrous asset overall as far as poly count goes. So this is good. I might actually have these two feet pieces be one and the same. If we hide this for a second and we go to our high poly, this is its own piece and this is its own piece, but we can combine them in the low poly. It's okay if these are detached because it already naturally looks like there's a difference going on here, so I'm cool with that. Not the low poly layer, we want the ZBrush layer. There we go. So On that note, let's go ahead and shift right click extract faces. So this is its own mesh. And we can focus on this, get it nice and good with the UVs laid out, and we'll duplicate it around. And on that same note, we will do the same with this guy. So extract faces. But let's start off by making sure the actual geo on him is good. So I'm just shrinking this all down. And then is there a face on the top? Yep. So shrink that down as well. And I'll actually end up deleting that face because we really don't need it. Lower this down, plump it out a little bit. Plump that out. I just want to make sure that this is flush with the bottom of this guy here. That's another thing to note when you're doing vertex snapping with this many verts. You should probably turn off the high poly. It gets a little bit crazy pretty quickly. But it seems like that'll do it. It's a pretty basic shape overall. We can actually just do a mesh, combine, and merge all the verts on this. And then this individual piece will look something like this. Seems that just this vert has been poked in. Interesting. So yeah, you kind of want that look when you're baking it down where it's like everything is just subtly poking through. You don't want too much of the low poly showing, you don't want too much of the high poly showing. This is kind of the look you're going for, and it even seems like the high poly is a little bit squished in, so that's good. Cool. Let's go ahead and UV this guy, and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. So if we go to our UV editor, this mine pops up on the other screen. This is probably going to be one of the more interesting parts of the tutorial. I'm definitely used to UVing on multiple windows, but we're going to be kind of confined to just this one for now. So let's see how we're going to go about doing this. So this one's a pretty easy example. I'm going to take this, project it by camera. We're going to need a seam somewhere. So let's go ahead and add interesting. When I double click that, it doesn't go all the way through. Is that because there's... Oh. Yeah, that'll do it. There's a face floating in the middle. Let's go ahead and merge those verts again. And now when I double click it, sweet, it'll go all the way through. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to shift right click cut. So now there's a actual cut in our UVs. And then select the faces on the bottom. And we can just camera project these differently. So now we have this shell for the bottom. We have this sort of cylindrical shape, and there's a cut down the middle, so we can now unfold. So to do that, shift right click, unfold. Unfold U will be horizontal, unfold V will be vertical. So let's do U first. And V, it seems like there's for some reason that didn't cut all the way through. try that again. There we go. So just straight up unfold. And unfold. For some reason that got deattached. Let's reattach the part that's supposed to be there, and we'll stitch it together so it's slapped on. Right, so this is one of the important steps when it comes to getting good bakes, is having proper UVs. So not only do we have to focus on where we're softening and hardening our edges, we have to make sure our UVs are laid out properly. So let's just start with this one. This will be an easy one. Unfold U, unfold V, or we could just straight up do unfold. And we want to sort of orient things where they're pretty all horizontal or all vertical. And the reason we're going to do that is because pretty much we're going to be baking our normal information to a texture, and textures use pixels, and the straighter we keep things, the less chances there's going to be some weird sort of angle and fuzziness, especially at lower resolutions. So if we can keep things straight here, we can afford to make things a little bit smaller and lower res while still maintaining a seamless texture. So let's move forward with that. It seems I've somehow put on grid snapping, so I'm going to reset my tool and reset tool. And I guess it is something I must have turned on in here, but I don't think that's really going to matter for this section. So what I'm going to be doing is flattening this guy out. Now, there's a few ways we can do this. The first way is to select all the UVs row by row, go to the align and snap, and we can just snap this down, snap this down, and each one of these icons represents a different snap. So this is all the way to the left, align it in the middle horizontally, all the way to the right, all the way up, vertically middle, and all the way down. And by middle, it's just averaging it out. So what I'm doing is just snapping all of these guys down to their lowest point. And pardon me, it's honestly been like a hot minute since I've UV'd inside of Maya. I've been doing so much UVing in Max, so it's definitely taken me a second to get used to everything again. I definitely prefer UVing inside of Maya, so it shouldn't take me too long to catch back up to speed. But what I'm doing here is I'm pushing these borders to their sides, grabbing everything in the middle, and if we just unfold U, it should line everything up pretty good. From here we can just sort of select this and average in the middle. Average, 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 average. Just hitting G. And you might be thinking that this is stretching our UVs a bit. In fact, if I turn on a checkerboard, which I'm going to use a script for that. You think it might be stretching. The stretching is very, very minimal, and honestly, I'll take a little bit of UV stretching over broken normals any day, especially because we can still go in here and fix this stuff up pretty easily. I'm just going to be manually sliding some of this around. As you can see, even though we're getting a tiny bit of pinching at the top, that's going to be pretty much impossible to notice. And at the same time, we're going to be getting pretty much a perfect bake out of all this stuff. So that's how I would unfold this part. The script I'm using here is by Malcolm. I think it's Malcolm361. If you Google Maya plugins, he will come up right away. This tool will probably make your UVs 5 times faster. Once I sort of go over the basics and do a few examples, I'm going to be switching over to using this tool. And what this tool basically is you can planar everything from X, Y, Z. In the camera angle, we can project based on a specific textile density we want. We can gridify our UVs, which will essentially take this, the rounded version, and turn it into this with a single click. So that's why I really, really like this tool. And then we have the unfold UV, and both at the same time, straighten stuff, orient stack, layout UVs, copy and paste textile density. This guy here will save you a ton of time. And like I said, once I do a few examples, I'm definitely going to be switching over to this for the rest of the chapter. So I think it's only like $2. It's really a lifesaver. So highly recommend picking that up. But anyways, we can close out of this for now. Obviously, this is not the final UVs for it. It's way too big, but it's gotten us most of the way there. So with this, the rules for baking is essentially anytime there's a 90-degree angle, you harden that edge. Everything else is a soft edge. So we can straight up soften everything. But down here, this is a 90-degree transition. We harden that. And now if we were to bake down the leg directly onto this, we would get a perfect bake. Everything's set up exactly as it's supposed to be. Should be. I'm just making sure we're not getting any weird artifacting. Let's freeze, transform, delete history, merge vertices. It seems like something over here is a bit weird. Soften. Oh, because it's only doing half of it that way. Okay. There we go. Now that's perfect. Okay, so now we can go ahead and, since we've done the UVs on this, we can duplicate it to all the other ones. So just Control D like we normally would. I'm going to go ahead and poke face down here. Snap that into position. And delete the existing ones. Let's just slap on the high poly to make sure we're getting that pretty even all around. Okay, good, good. Duplicate this guy. Oh. Yeah, before I delete those guys, I should probably duplicate these all around. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, good. Okay. So now we can delete those, and we can combine all of these pieces. The only other thing I would suggest for this is if we go to our UV editor and select these guys, it's going to show us where our seams are. And since we duplicated these guys, these seams are on the outside. So let's just go ahead and rotate them inwards. Texture seams like this, we obviously don't want to be visible, and we have a really good chance of hiding them so nobody sees them if we just tuck them inside like so. perfect. Okay, so that's the feet done. Add that to the low poly. And yeah, as you can see, like, it's just some basic cleanup. Anytime we're duplicating stuff around, we're going to be UVing them just as we did there. And all in all, this will probably take a solid chunk of time, but it's going to take nowhere near as long as, say, for example, the mid poly. Like for this, we can do this really quickly. I'm going to straight up delete that. Let's take a look at this guy. I think this is handled pretty nicely. We can even reduce the poly count even more if we collapse these edges. We really only need to worry about the roundness on these like edge perimeters, because that's affecting the silhouette. But this kind of stuff here, if we merge, collapse edges, you'll never know, right? So I could even probably take it a step further in here. Unless there isn't the correct amount of edges. No, there should be. But at that point, it's pushing it a little bit too far. Maybe not. We are going to be baking this down, so I don't think it's really going to affect it that much if we collapse it down like so. The baked information should still retain quite a bit of detail on that. We're also not going to be needing this. So we can just merge to center, delete that, and close that off. As for the outside, we can just merge to center like so. And like the inside, there's going to definitely be some points where we can collapse some of these edges where we just simply do not need this ridiculous amount of geometry. So especially closer to the middle where we aren't going to be seeing the silhouette, I'm just going to go through and do a quick pass. Because for these areas, right, it's just cutting the geo in half, but simultaneously keeping a nice round silhouette. So we might as well save as much as we can. And this might be the last loop for it, because I still want that silhouette to be nice. I'm wondering if in the middle I could get away with more. Yeah, like there's fine, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then just straight up. No, I don't want to delete that. Seems to have lost a bit of roundness while we were doing this, so I'm just going to pump this up a bit. And then definitely one of the downsides of this is you can't just ring select it like you normally would. Soften that, harden the edges. So let's cut the geo way, way down while simultaneously if we turn off wireframe. It's a little less smooth, but definitely worth the cost. Especially when we bake it down and you really won't even notice a difference. Like in here, you already can't really tell a difference. So I'm tempted to, oh, wait a second. There's a ring of verts here where I guess I deleted the edges but didn't get the verts attached to them. Let's go ahead and delete those. And yeah, I say I'm happy with that. We can go ahead and add that to the low poly layer. So it's just, yeah, pieces like that are going to be a lot faster. Realistically, we'll tackle this in the next part. This will by far take the longest out of anything in the entire tutorial. Maybe potentially rivaling this, but I feel like this won't take as long because it should mostly be set up. I suppose I probably should have cleaned that up before I did it, and the keycaps might take a little bit of time, but we've been recording for an hour. Let's just get a few easy ones out of the way. This one, pretty straightforward. Can just get rid of this. But yeah, hopefully after watching this first part, you'll start to pick up a pattern, and then the rest of it will kind of fall into place. There might be the occasional one where it's a little bit different and more difficult to handle, and especially later on when we're doing UVs, it might be a good idea to sort of pop back in here and see what's going on. Faces like this we can delete because nobody will ever see it. Just kidding. You can see underneath. Interesting. This was a backup for something, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, we can delete the screws on this and send this off to the low poly zone. Yeah, I don't mind just banging out a few more of these super quickly, just some of the more basic ones. Yeah, these are good examples. So with this, there's really no point in getting this inner ring. Sorry, let me undo that. Up to here, we don't need it because all that stuff is not affecting the silhouette whatsoever, so we can just fill the hole. Do the same here. And I feel like we don't need this much geo going around. So I want to see what it looks like if we just straight up cut that in half. It's definitely looking a little bit chunky, but I don't think we'll ever get too close on it. Maybe like this close tops. Not to mention, when we bake down information, it'll look even less chunky because it's baking down a perfectly smooth object to it. Yeah, it'd be kind of silly to have a ton of geo up there anyways. So let's move forward with that. Let's delete these edges that we really don't need. So I'm just going to grab those and hit Control Backspace, and then we can just cap this off like we would everything else. So since we're duplicating this guy, let's use this as another example for how we would properly UV this. I'm actually going to straight up extract faces and make it its own, make it its own mesh. So, UV editor. I'm going to select these faces, project them from Y so it's straight down. Let's go ahead and cut at the bottom, hiding the seam down there, and we can unfold our UVs. If we look at the checker pattern, perfectly distributed. Another thing that I forgot to mention is anytime there's a hard edge, aka a 90-degree angle, not only do we have to harden that edge by actually like hardening the edge with the mesh display option, we also have to cut the UV shell there. So this, for example, let's just project that from X. But the thing is, we have to keep in mind, we have to actually project it as a different shell. We couldn't like attach this. If we were to attach these two, it wouldn't have a proper bake. So anytime a 90-degree angle occurs, harden that edge, break off that face to a different shell. This is another 90-degree angle. So once again, I'm going to be projecting this from Y. We're going to cut it. We're going to unfold V. And then these faces project by X. I'm going to want to rotate them in a way where I can fully straighten this shell so these guys are perfectly straight. That's another thing that I like this UV mapping tool for, is if I select this shell and I go to straighten shell, or I think I might have to have the UV selected. Yeah, it'll line it all up perfectly straight. So you could do that with the align options, or like this plugin is just a insane time saver when it comes to that stuff. So there's that side. Then this guy here, if it's red, it means that it's inverted, so it's projecting it backwards. We can simply fix that by going to modify flip, or you can unfold it. That should usually do the trick as well. But let's just keep this up. So modify flip, and let's go ahead and straighten shell. So it'll line all that up for us perfectly. And then finally this one, we can planar map from Y, add our cut to the bottom so it's hidden. And as you can see, it's purple. It just means that there's properly orientated polygons, which are these blue ones, and poorly orientated ones, which are red, on top of each other. But anyways, that should do it for these. Obviously this is way too big, so I'm going to scale this down. Which obviously this is still way too big, but it's infinitely better. So let's go ahead and move our pivot to the corner. Control duplicate this guy. Move them all the way over. And then grab the old one and delete it. We can just sort of mesh combine these guys, and then an auto smooth should do the trick on this, because these are all 90-degree angles. And send this guy off to the low poly zone. So yeah, I think I covered a decent amount here as far as different examples. I'll probably do a few more parts like this, and then we'll see if I'll continue on the tradition of the high poly section where I just kind of speed up the majority of it. Maybe I will compile all the really difficult ones and just do those, and leave all the really simple, you know, polls and stuff like that to sort of do on my own, or at the very least just record it and you know, post it as a different part where I lightly commentate on it. Anyways, guys, that'll probably do it for this part. So hopefully you guys did enjoy this, and hopefully you learned something. We'll be doing the rest of this pretty quickly. Like I said, I think after the mid-poly, that was a bit too much to sort of lay down in one section. So I'm going to try and think of a better way to sort of go about this. There's a lot of components, so maybe I'll focus on maybe the keyboard, some of these more interesting areas, like this, and the frame, and then a lot of the more basic stuff like the poles and, you know, the area back here I might just sort of leave to just sort of speed up and commentate over in post. But anyways, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this. Yeah, I'll figure it out in the next one. I'll have it all figured out by then and explain it to you guys. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next video. See ya.